Hi, my name is Barb Mangle. I'm the founder of Higher Power Coaching and Consulting. I want to welcome you to my podcast, Fragmented to Whole, Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery. This is episode 49, Soothe Your Mind and Heart During COVID-19. For those of you who are listening during the week this is posted, which is the second full week of the quarantine because of COVID-19, I want you to know that I hear you. I hear you in terms of what's on your mind. Some of you are struggling with great anxiety, depression, and feel overwhelmed by the situation, the unpredictability about what tomorrow brings, as well as what the years to come bring, especially in terms of the financial impact of this pandemic. It's my sincerest wish to help you ease your mind and heart during this time. And always, really, for that matter. Rather than coming up with something new this week, I want to suggest specific episodes of my podcast that you might find helpful depending on what you're struggling with, whether you've listened to them before or not. I've actually just gone back through and listened to all the episodes again in preparation for my 50th episode. And believe it or not, I found it extremely helpful, and I created them. Based on what's going on for you, I'll suggest an episode that you might consider listening to, which could very likely help you get through your situation. A lot of people are really anxious and upset and freaking out about not really knowing what's happening, not having control of their lives, about not knowing what the future is going to look like. And that can be a really scary place. I tackle a lot of these issues in my podcast. So I'm going to remind you about what's covered in several of my podcasts so that you might go to the one that you really need. I'm going to go in chronological order in which they were released. And I'll start with one of the most popular episodes I recorded, which is the second one, and it's on acceptance. I talk about learning how to stop fighting against what is currently happening, just accepting it. I share the actual process I went through to be able to accept that which seemed completely unacceptable to me. When you learn to accept what's happening, it doesn't mean you have to like it, but it definitely makes your life a lot easier. When you take off the boxing gloves and step out of the ring and quit fighting, acceptance really means you stop fighting against life and start flowing with it, wherever it may lead. If you're the kind of person who feels like everything is happening to me, I want to remind you that things are happening. They're not happening to you. They're just happening. It might be helpful to you to listen to episode number 3, which is on victim mentality, if that's the way that you think. I personally had absolutely no idea that I had victim mentality until I came into recovery. Don't get me wrong, I could spot a victim 10 miles away, but I didn't know that I had that. You know what they say, you spot it, you got it. Well, when I realized I had victim mentality, it changed everything. That shift was one of the biggest epiphanies of my recovery. If you have lots of anxiety, you may be thinking the same negative thoughts over and over and over again. And I know this because that used to be me. Even though I have always been an optimist, I didn't even recognize that I was doing this stuff until I went through the process of recovery. If you want to learn how to overcome negative thought loops, you might listen to episode 4. If you're the kind of person who has never been able to reach out and ask people for help, you're going to have a really tough time during this pandemic because we really need to be able to reach out to other people and rely on other people during this pandemic. I was super self-sufficient before recovery, and the idea of reaching out for help was just not even an option for me. I was the helper, I was the rescuer. When I started even thinking about reaching out to people once I got in recovery, honestly, it made me feel like I was gonna die. And I'm not exaggerating. I literally felt terror. And I have actually learned how to reach out for help in recovery, which I discuss in episode 9, ironically called Reaching Out. If, on the other hand, you're someone who's always actually helping other people and bending over backwards to help other people and exhausting yourself, you might want to listen to episode 10, which is Keeping the Focus on Me. I talk about how I learned to do this because, as they say in airplanes, you have to put the oxygen mask on yourself first, because if you don't, you will pass out and then you're no good to those around you. It is not selfish to keep the focus on yourself. No matter who you are, it's always helpful to get a shift in perspective. And if you focus on gratitude, it will give you just that. In episode 11, I talk about gratitude and the role it's played in really transforming my life. It helps me keep the spotlight on the positive things, no matter how shitty circumstances seem. For those of you who were continual rescuers, there's another episode for you. I talk in episode 15 on the difference between helping versus rescuing. It's really wonderful to be helpful to people, but it's not wonderful to rescue people. And it's not helpful to them or you. If you don't know the difference between helping and rescuing, you can learn about that difference in episode 15. And no matter what's going on with you right now, the episode on 1 day at a time, which is number 18, might very well be helpful to you. I talk about not just 1 day at a time, but sometimes we need to deal with things one moment at a time. And then there's isolation versus healthy alone time. Because we all have to isolate to a certain degree during this quarantine, it's probably not a bad idea for you to listen to episode 21, which talks about isolation versus healthy alone time, which really has to do with your motivation, the distinction between those two things. Many of us have trouble with what's going on in our heads. It's the thoughts we think that make our lives miserable. I'm sure you've seen situations where two different people have exactly the same horrible circumstances, but they deal with it completely differently. And for one person, it's a disaster, and for another, it's a blessing. And that has everything to do with the way they think about the circumstances. So, episode 24 about stinkin' thinking might be a good episode for you. For those of you who are catastrophizing about the future, which I call living into the wreckage of the future, I talk about how to not do that in episode 29. And I know all about that because I used to do that again, even though I'm an optimist. I'd have all these conversations in my head or play out all these shitty scenarios for all the screwed up things that were going to happen, and realized in recovery that I was actually making my life worse. I was making it more likely for that shit to happen because A, I'm not living well in the present, which means I'm not preparing for a good future. B, I'm creating a self-fulfilling prophecy on top of the fact that C, I'm also making myself anxious. Another that might help you in terms of what you want the world to look like today, tomorrow, and in the future is overcoming unrealistic expectations, which is episode 31. I definitely lived with unrealistic expectations about myself, about people around me, and about the world before recovery. So if you want to get your expectations in line with reality, you might want to listen to episode 31. And then right after that, I had a bonus episode, which isn't a numbered episode. It's called Affirmations for Addicts. Whether you're an addict or not, if you want to hear about 15 minutes or so of affirmations that are good for anybody, there's no podcast intro or outro. It's just affirmations. And the last episode I want to recommend is number 46, which is on choice versus control. Believe it or not, you get to have more choice in your life when you let go of control. That may sound counterintuitive, but I break that down for you in that episode. So, if you are having an extremely difficult time with how to manage your mind and your emotions during this crisis, feel free to reach out to me. You can reach me at barb@higherpowercoachingandconsulting.com. And you can also find me on Instagram at barbhigherpower. Please reach out to me. I'd love to chat with you and see if there's something I can do to help you ease your mind and calm your heart. I wish you and your loved ones and everybody in the world all the best. Stay safe, keep 6 feet of social distance from others, and wash your hands thoroughly so we can flatten that curve. Namaste.
That's it for today. If you like what you've heard here, then you just might be interested in private coaching with me. If that sounds like you, head on over to my website, which is higherpowercoachingandconsulting.com, and click on the contact menu. I'd be happy to schedule a consultation with you to help you make lasting changes in your life, like I've made deep, lasting changes in my life. My ideal client is someone who is ripe for change, but I'll coach anyone who wants to be happy, joyous, and free. So if that's you, shoot me an email. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe so you can be sure to get future episodes of my podcast. Thanks again.